good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter what time of day it is as you're joining us. I want to welcome you to this week's episode of the Chimney in the Fireplace Success Network. I'm having some cam issues on my end, so this is going to the two prettier co-hosts are going to be the one, and they put the beast in the background today. So hey, we'll get this cam issue fixed in a few days, but it's hey, the audio works great. So anyway, we got a really special guest. I met this guy a couple weeks ago, learned a lot from him, and we're going to roll out a process to you today that I think is going to increase your ability to have local authority in your market area and a higher demand for your services. So Sheryl, what's your thoughts on today's subject matter?
Well, I think everybody can use a little step into the light. We need to be seen. We need the ways to get there. And I think it's going to work well. I think if people will listen in, I think they'll learn a lot.
Yep. Brandi, what about you? We're going to talk about a process that, we've recommended for quite a while, but actually we're going to step it up a little bit. So what's your thoughts on today's subject matter?
Yeah, well, I'm really just learning about Jim. So I've been researching him this week ever since I know he was coming on the show. So I feel like I'm going to be learning a lot along with our listeners.
That's it. So our guest today is a gentleman that goes by the Radio Pitchman, and he has a lot of history in broadcast radio, but we're not going to be talking about broadcast radio today in the conventional way that people think of radio. We're going to talk about a newer technology-driven system that any company can employ. So, Jim, I want to welcome you to today's show, brother. How's the weather out there in Houston, Texas today?
It's a little overcast and a little drizzly, but other than that, winter time is nice here in Houston.
Hey, that's fantastic. That's the thing about Houston. Like I've told you, I've got a client down there, and when I go down there in the wintertime, it's like, hey, this is like South Florida. You live in actually a tropical climate, very similar to the southern part of Florida there in Houston. Am I correct?
Yeah, subtropical, and we have, palm trees and all those tropical plants. But I will tell you, I do love this time of year because I get about 2.5 months of the ability to be able to use my fireplace inside and outside. So I love to burn.
Yep. And ever since we've got to know each other, you've been sending me pictures and enjoying your fireplace and all that, which is a great thing. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about your background in radio and what you've been doing up to this point.
It goes back to 1984. And a lot of you are thinking, wow, this guy's old. Back in college, I started my radio career, and radio's changed a lot over time, but I fell in love with it, and it's still a great medium. It's one of the few mediums that haven't changed much over the past 100 years. Newspapers have slid off, TV's changed. If you have an old TV, you can't even use it anymore because they upgraded to digital. You can actually take a radio that was built in the 1920s and tune into a radio station today. That's how it hasn't changed. And so it's something I've just been doing for decades. And I love helping home service companies get their message across either on radio or what we do a lot of now are podcasts for them.
Okay. And that's where I met you. I met you at Tommy Mello's Vertical Track several weeks ago. We were both speaking there, and we ended up at the same breakfast table and the same lunch table. And we knew some of the same people, like Al Levy was a mutual acquaintance that we were both got to know each other with, and got to know a lot about what you were doing and how you were doing it. So you just said the big thing, which is podcasting. So tell us about your transition into spot podcasting today, Jim. What does that mean, and what promise does podcasting hold for a local service supplier? And our primary audience is a chimney service company, a fireplace shop, but it could be a home inspector, it could be a garage door guy, any of the home service contracting industry. So where does podcasting come into play, Jim?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because podcasting today is kind of like what getting a website was 20 years ago. People are like, I've heard about it. Should I get a website? Should I get an email? Prior to that, going back 30 some odd years, should I get a fax machine? So a buzzword today is podcast. And so many people are contacting me saying, I need to have a podcast. And I say, slow down. What are you trying to achieve with your podcast? And what I mean by that is a lot of people now from their basement, their attic, their living room, or their garage, get a microphone and a camera and they start podcasting. But they don't necessarily have an agenda. They just want to be out there, but everyone's out there. There are millions of podcasts out there going on right now. So what I do is I help define it for the home service provider. And I generally recommend this book, actually. And if you haven't gotten this book, everybody, you should get it. It's called They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. And Marcus Sheridan is a guy who built his swimming pool business in Richmond, Virginia. Hugely by adding a lot of content. And basically the They Ask You answer is when you're doing a podcast, don't think about yourself. So many people say, I'm great. We've been around for 100 years. We serve the greater blah, blah, blah area. We have, 3,000 5-star reviews. No one really cares about you. They care about themselves. And it's true. Just think about yourself. Do you care more about yourself or someone else? And in general, we do care about ourselves first. So when they come to your podcast site or your website, they want to see things like, how can this company help me? So you should pose questions like that. And when you do, you then want to answer them, because what Marcus says in his book is they're asking frequently asked questions that you have the answer to. So picture this, everybody. If you're on a swimming pool website and you see a podcast, and we specialize in audio podcasts, so you listen to it because the question on there is how much does the average swimming pool cost? And you listen to it. You can now hear the owner of the company talk to you about something you want to buy. And his competition probably doesn't have that on their website. So you as the pool guy, the guy selling pools, are way ahead of your competition. And the homeowner is probably going to go with you, or at least set an appointment, because they've gotten to know you as a business owner. They know you're an expert and they feel comfortable. And people tend to buy from comfort. So when you see a TV ad in the billboard and a truck go by with the logo on it, when you then go to Google and type in, I need a swimming pool, and you see that logo again or that name, you're like, I'm familiar with them. Even though you may never have physically been touched by them, but you have through their promotion and advertising, you then say to yourself, I feel comfortable because I've seen them everywhere. And we as humans just gravitate toward them.
Gotcha. So Sheryl, what would be the first question you would ask Jim today on this?
Okay, I'm more interested in the fact of how you would promote it in a local area, as opposed to it just, it going out to the general world.
Well, it actually will go out to the general world. And what you need to do is you need to optimize it for your area. So we put a lot of keywords in and so forth. So every time we do a podcast for a client, and I won't get into the details of that, but I will tell you, we also transcribe all of the spoken word into written words, and Google will pick that up. So it's kind of a complicated answer, but generally anyone in the world would be able to find it theoretically through a Google search, but we try to refine it to be local. But understand this as well, everybody. This isn't just to be found out on the web. This is something to use offline. So for instance, if you're a home service provider, let's say you're an HVAC company, and you have a homeowner that says, you're one of 3 or 4 companies that we're getting bids from. Why should I hire you? You can say, well, you know what? 3 months ago, we did a podcast about the same type of install that we would have to do for you. May I send that to you? The competition's not doing that, I'm telling you. So you're standing apart. So it's something you can use every day to help separate yourself, because it may not be to get a lead. It may be to close an opportunity, which could be more important.
Okay. So Brandi, and so you'll know, Jim, Brandi and her husband, Jeremy, own a home service contracting business in Kansas City. So she works with us and also with her own company there. So Brandi, I'm sure you're looking at this from the aspect of Blues Brothers and how this would help Blues Brothers. So what kind of questions do you have for Jim?
Yeah, well, that kind of led into one of my questions. First of all, I love podcasts. I'm like a podcast junkie. In fact, last week I was in Utah with my family trying to take pictures, and it said my phone was too full. So I handed it over to the 18-year-old who's very technologically savvy, and he looks and he goes, Mom, it's because you have so many podcasts taking up so much space. So I had to quickly go through and delete some of those. But I had a girlfriend who had a podcast. So she owned a franchise of accounting companies. And actually, a year after doing her podcast, that led her to be able to sell the franchise. And she sold it, retired. She's younger than me. Excellent. But I feel like when I listen to the really good podcasts and they talk about them, it seems like it takes a lot of time. It's not you're going on there and you're talking for 30 minutes or an hour. It seems like it takes a lot of behind the scenes work with editing. And then you're talking about these keywords. Can you talk a little bit more about what all is involved? And is that something then that your company handles for these home service companies on that end?
Yes, actually, I cover it in my book. This is a very small book. It's easy to read, only 20 minutes in length, probably. It's called the Radio Pitchman's Podcast Playbook, and it really explains how to do everything that we do. And so to answer your question in short, all of those things take a long time to do and learn how to do. And I'm going to say something right now that's going to resonate with every home service provider. There's you, the expert home service provider, who knows what you're doing. You can do it quickly and efficiently, and you charge for it. And then you've got the do-it-yourselfer. So I'm the professional, and then there's the do-it-yourselfer. So you can do all this yourself, but I strongly suggest you don't. I've been doing this since 1984, so I have a lot of experience in the questions to ask, the interview process. Of course, then we edit it and we do all the other background things. And that's just what we do as a service. But if somebody wants some tips on how to do it themselves, I can send you a copy of my book for free, or you can, find me online and we can connect and we can do a Zoom call and I'll tell you how to do it yourself. But there's just a lot there to do it right. Anyone can do a podcast. Anybody can. But why would you be wasting your time and possibly even hurt your reputation by looking less than you are? Everything you do as a home service provider, as a company, as a professional, in my opinion, should look and sound professional. So if you're wearing a uniform every day, if you're wearing an ID badge, if you have a wrapped vehicle, if your people are trained well, don't you also want to look good and sound good on your podcast?
So just a follow-up question real quick. So to me, then what I'm hearing, going back to the website thing, it sounds like it could be the difference between I'm creating my own website on GoDaddy versus I have a marketing company that's handling all that professionally.
Yes, or someone who says, I do my own SEO versus hiring an SEO company. Someone saying, I do my own videos versus hiring a good videographer. If you're getting married, do you hire a professional photographer and videographer, or do you have your brother do it? That's the question, really, okay? And so you want it done right. And so we can assist with that. But like I said, if anyone has any questions, I can help you through it. That's all we do.
Okay. So Jim, I'm putting your book, the Radio Pitchman's Podcast book. Is that correct?
Yes. And by the way, it's not available on Amazon. This is a book that I can send you for free. So Jerry, if you want to somehow connect them to me or whatever, let me know and we'll make sure we get these books out. I send them out every day to people. I like,
okay,
I like to help them.
I'm putting the book and your email address in the comments right now. Is that okay with you, Jim?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's going up into the comments right now as we talk about that. But I think it was really interesting what you just said, because like I said, in today's world, I don't think anybody really knows how to do their websites. And, 20 years ago, Sheryl built our websites. And I think it was a hard challenge for her to turn them over to another company. And yeah, we kind of probably gulp every time we get the monthly bill for what the websites cost this day, but it's a necessary evil. So having expert help in there it's a good thing. So, Jim, here's my next question. How do people build the content? I mean, if you're going to do this, you got to have interesting content. So how do you build this content, Jim?
So it's interesting. I want everybody to forget everything they think they know about a podcast, and I'll help you out with that. What most people think a podcast is entertaining. They want to hear maybe a celebrity podcast. Maybe they want to, hear how to, bake cookies better and so forth, which is kind of educational. Ours is more like the educational one, but it's not a podcast like what we're doing now in this conversation. It is very specific to the person who's going to land on your website or a podcast site, because we build podcast sites for the home service provider, but it can be embedded onto their website as well. And what we're doing is, remember what I said a few moments ago, it's not about the home service provider saying, hey, we're great, we've been doing this for 100 years and so forth. All the homeowner wants to see and absorb is, how can you help me with my problem? So I have a leaky chimney, or there's always, smoke coming into my living room on rainy days when I try to make a fire. Okay, so they want answers to those questions. How do I solve these problems? And so these are very specific questions that are frequently asked questions that we come up with. When I do the process with the home service provider, I ask the questions as the professional interviewer, and they answer them. And they're usually only 3 to 5 minutes long, because people don't want to listen to a 30-minute podcast on the answer to the question they have. So does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And Jim, if we get real about this, you're from Houston, Texas. And when we sat down to lunch a couple weeks ago, you didn't even know chimney sweeps existed in Houston. Was that correct? You remember that conversation?
Yeah, a true chimney sweep. There are people who claim to be able to clean a chimney, but yes, because it's not a huge business down here in this part of the country, but there obviously is a need. I have a wood burning fireplace, so someone like myself would have a need for that service.
Yeah, I think you were kind of shocked when there was a gentleman sat down with us from Houston, Texas, with a pretty sizable company in Houston, Texas, which signified to him, hey, you got to get the word out a little bit better. Do you agree? You remember that?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So Sheryl,
you're talking about Lee.
Yeah, we are. So Sheryl, let's go to you.
So what I'm understanding, you do information, not advertising, that's what you want your people to do. And so I'm sure there's a lot of clients that want to tell the best about themselves. And, the question's important, but this is why we're great at doing. How do you bring them back into the realm?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, right. You've got a client that your program is to inform people, not to advertise. Mm-hmm. So you've got a client that, he's wanting to inform, but he's also wanting to add that huge advertisement about himself into your podcast. How do you control that situation with a client?
I basically tell them up front before I work with them the way it's going to work. And if they're not willing to work that way, I can't work with them, because it's not going to work. So let me explain this, and Jerry will understand this for sure, and I'm sure Sheryl and Brandi will as well. When you speak in front of a group, you're an expert. People assume you are, even if they don't know who you are. I saw Jerry speak. I didn't know Jerry well before I spoke. I saw him speak in Phoenix, but I knew when he took the stage and those lights were on him, he was an expert. And when we get on stage, we don't say, hey, we're great, buy from me now. We talk about what we're really good at. And at the end of the talk, guess what? People come up to you and they want your email, they want your phone number, and they want to buy that book that you're selling at the back of the room. It's exactly like that.
Yeah. Sheryl, does that answer your question?
It does, and all three of us do speak. So I knew where I was going with the question. This is more, I know we have an audience that doesn't know a lot about this. So trying to ask some questions may help the audience.
Yeah, got you covered.
And so, Sheryl, you're right. Home service providers are very good at what they do. They are experts in their field. They're not necessarily marketers. They're not website builders. They're not podcasters, but they can use all those vehicles to gain more credibility and get business. So the point to it is we don't always have to get up in front of the room or on a podcast or even on a TV commercial and say, we're great. All you need to do is show that you have the experience and that you can solve their problem. It's always this. Someone has a problem, and that's why they're contacting you. That's the only reason. Now, their problem may be, well, I want a new Lamborghini, so that's a little different. But for most home service providers, even if it's a kitchen remodel, they have a problem. They have an old kitchen, and they want it solved. But many home service providers go out there to fix something or replace something like a garage door or a water heater. And so when the homeowner has a problem, who do they want to hire? Someone with experience, someone that they can trust. And that's why it's better to convey that and help the customer with their need versus saying, I don't want to hear from you, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I don't care about your problems. I'm great. I've been doing this for 50 years and I have a lot of experience. And if you don't like it, well, then go hire someone else. Nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear what you can do for them. It's all about them, and you've got to really put your ego aside.
Yeah. So Brandi, I'm hoping you're listening this from the aspect. In fact, you and I have had a couple discussions about content in the last few days. So what's the next question you would have for our friend Jim?
And I always have to make like 5 comments before I get to my question. But so I wanted to tell you those other chimney sweeps you were talking about, we call those chuck in the trucks. But my sister and my sister-in-law both live in Houston. And so you guys have an amazing company there, Lord's Chimney, who I know you're familiar with. And so they service Houston and Beaumont. So I'll just give a shout out to them. So my question is, how do you differentiate? And let me explain that more. Our industry, it's almost comical. So for example, Jerry started using StreamYard, and now all of a sudden, everybody else in the industry is using StreamYard. Jerry started a podcast, and now everybody else is doing a podcast that does consulting in the industry. I mean, I can laugh. I try to make jokes with Jerry and Sheryl. How long do you think it's going to take before this person copies this? Yeah. So the first part of the question is, do you have, like, let's say, multiple heating and cooling companies you work with? And the second part is, then how do you differentiate yourself in that market?
So in most markets, we don't have more than one in a given category. So when I first started my business back in 2005, it was just in Houston. And now we're across the entire country. And I've got, clients in Phoenix. Actually, I've got 2 in the Phoenix area, but they're in different categories. I've got some in Houston and Dallas and in Florida, all over the place. So, but it really, doesn't matter that much. I mean, picture this. You are a home service provider and you have this information on your website. There are so many competitors. Let's take an HVAC company in Houston. There's probably 500 to 1,000. No joke. 500 to 1,000. We're in the 4th largest city. And even if 5 of them had it, it's still not saturated at all. Is that answering your question?
No, it is. Yeah. And I
Okay.
believe it because we get calls, 1 to 2 calls every week from somebody that's in New Jersey or Wisconsin who sees our YouTube videos on how to light your pilot. So then they're calling here wanting advice. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen too, because we're all connected now. There's about 8 billion people on Earth now, and we're all much closer than we ever have been. And so it's very possible if someone is searching for something, because what we do is we build for our clients highly optimized podcast sites. It's like it's a separate website that's just for podcasts. and it looks much like the client's website. And it shows up all over the place. And we also put it on Audible and Google and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and it's just spread out throughout the universe, and it's found in many places.
Yeah. So, Jim, one of the things is you talked about people and talking about them buying because they have a problem. Well, when Sheryl and I were going through training with Larry Winget, who's a pretty well-known author, coach, and speaker, one of the things that he shared with us was that 70% of people buy from a pain. In other words, they got something hurting. Then there's 30%, they buy because they have a desire. They want to get something. Let's take medical care, okay? It could be that you're in pain. You got an appendicitis that's got to come out, okay? So you got to have a doctor to take that appendix out. On the other side, it could be somebody that wants plastic surgery to increase their looks. They don't have to have it from pain, but they have a desire to be a more presentable looking person. So you can address both of these points in that. We talked about swimming pools earlier. So swimming pools aren't a pain, that's a desire. So we can go after both of these using the podcast formula like you've talked about.
Yes. So with this, and by the way, I love Larry Winget, and I've interviewed him on my Bring On Success radio program years ago. And the thing about Larry is he's a quiet guy. So in any case, if you know Larry, he's not. He's great. So when it comes to swimming pools, for instance, that's a luxury item. It's something we don't need. Unless it's a repair issue. So that's the pain point, right? Oh, my pool has turned green. I need to get this fixed ASAP. But if you just want to put a $100,000 hole in your backyard, AKA a swimming pool, that's something that you don't need to have. And it's also a large ticket item, and you're going to take a lot more time to research it. It's really important now that you're answering all those questions for the homeowner. And, because it's a very large cost. The beautiful thing too about what Marcus Sheridan has put together with They Ask You Answer is that it really shortens that sales appointment. So picture this, you're selling pools. Someone has spent an hour and a half listening to various podcasts that you've been putting out there. When you go out to that house, they already know who you are. They know your company. They feel comfortable with you because they know what you sound like. They feel like they know you. They're more likely to buy from you, and they're going to have less questions because you've already answered them before you even went out there. And also something great, and a lot of home service providers cringe when I say this, but trust me, it's good. People are going to disqualify themselves. It's so frustrating as a service provider when you go out to the house to find out that that's not a customer for you anyway. Don't you want them to make that decision that you cost too much or that the products you sell aren't the products that they want? Because time is money. I see Brandi nodding her head on that one. True, right?
I'm huge on letting them disqualify themselves.
You have to understand, Brandi trains CSRs across the country. That's what she primarily does, work with office staffs. And that's part of what she's teaching is how to qualify and disqualify the person who is not your customer. So what you're saying is by using this process, you can then qualify and disqualify prospects. Am I correct?
Yeah, they do it themselves. So picture this. Let's say that you're a custom pool builder and a homeowner goes to your website and they see the least expensive pool is going to be $80,000, but they can't afford more than 50. Oh, well, out they go. They don't even bother you. Now, I know a lot of people are cringing saying, well, no, I can sell them. It's kind of like that person who says, I'm going to change my spouse. Oh, bad idea, right? Don't even try. So understand, you want them to not call you. You do not want to go out there and try to sell them an $80,000 pool when they can only afford 50. You're both going to be upset. So they disqualify themselves. And that's the beautiful thing. I learned through doing direct response radio on how to make sure every phone call you get is not a lead. It's actually a job. So for my broadcast clients, where we do direct response radio, we actually do something called long form radio. It's an hour-long radio program. And I have the owner on the show, and we talk about everything. We even get down to price if we can. And we also have, free this and free that. So by the time the homeowner makes the call for the appointment, they're all ready to buy. If you watch an infomercial on TV and they have pots and pans, but wait, there's more. We'll throw in the free wooden spoons and spatula. Oh, but wait, it's only over a 4-payment period. It's only $29.95. When someone calls that 800 number with their credit card, do they have any questions? Nope. They're ready to buy. And that's what's so important. Got to stop wasting time, everybody. You've got to really think about it. So going back a little bit, the podcasts we do are not what you think they are. This is to position you and get that homeowner to disqualify themselves or qualify themselves and have you close higher dollar jobs for people you really want. And so a lot of people get confused. They're like, well, that's not what I thought you guys did. Well, no, it's actually better, I think. If you want to do a 1-hour podcast and talk about how great you are and so forth, that's fine. But if you really want to do something that's good for your customer and for your bottom line, you should really consider this book. Again, like I said, They Ask You Answer. You should read the book. I've listened to it twice on Audible, and I'm about to actually read it in the book itself. Also, something else too. A friend of mine wrote this book. When Can You Do It? I wrote the foreword of this book. This is what I'm talking about. So the guy who wrote this book, his name is Tom Decker. And what he talks about in here, basically, this is to help people with in-home sales. So if you're a home service provider, this is a great book. And Tom trains people on this. But when can you do it? Think about what that says. When can you do it? That's what we want that homeowner to ask when they call. Think about it. They know what the swimming pool costs. They know how long it takes to install it. They know you've been doing it for 30 years. They know the materials. So when they call, the question is when can you do it? They don't start asking questions. So how long have you been doing this? What kind of materials do you use? You've already answered the questions ahead of time. So it saves a lot of time and it qualifies that customer.
Okay. So Sheryl, what's your next question on this? I think I'm getting a totally different feeling about the podcast system you're talking about, where so many people look at, well, how many people are going to, what's my total number of listeners? But what you're talking about is using this as a sales tool and as a qualifying tool. So Sheryl, what's your next thing?
Okay, I know you are into the podcast, as in the speech podcast. Can you tell us your opinion on the differences? I know what the differences in doing them are, but the differences in the relativity to who's listening or looking at either listening to a podcast or watching a broadcast where you have the people in view.
So Sheryl, your question is do people rather see a video or listen?
Yes.
So, that varies depending upon the person. So videos, I strongly recommend to have videos on your website. I wouldn't have a lot, and I would keep them under 3 minutes, maybe a minute and a half, because people don't want to spend time because people will, go in and out. The nice thing about the audio podcasts that we produce or that anyone can produce is there are so many more outlets for audio. So I'll challenge the three of you. If we were to produce a video today, can you name 3 or more places to post that video online where someone would find it?
Okay, I'll go first. I'd go Facebook.
Okay.
I'd go YouTube. If it was short enough, I'd go Instagram. If it was short enough, I'd go TikTok. I would go the popular social channels.
Okay.
Sheryl, what about you?
Same.
Brandi?
Yes, all the same you said, plus I would do reels since that's popular now. But I have a feeling this is not where Jim's going with the question.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's fair. And then there's one called Vimeo, which is big. So the 2 largest places to host a video would be, of course, YouTube, which is the second most searched or search engine, if you will, search site in the world behind Google. And then, Vimeo is big as well, used by a lot of professionals. And so social media is another place as well. But you can also do the same thing with an audio podcast. What's nice about audio, though, is you can put it on where everyone is. So I would be shocked if the people who aren't tuned in to this broadcast today, right now, listening and watching to us, if they don't have the iHeart Video, the Audible player, if they don't have Spotify, if they don't have TuneIn, Apple or Google Podcasts. So when we do this, we build a podcast website for the client. And then every time we post one, it goes out to about 15 other major podcast sites. And we also put backlinks in all of those. So the homepage of that pool company is getting a backlink from Audible, from Spotify, from iHeart, and so forth. Another reason why I love audio, of course, I'm an old-fashioned guy, right? Because I'm a radio guy, is that people can listen to it anywhere. I live on a little ranch here in Texas. I spend a lot of time outside. And so when I'm doing things on the property, I'm listening to podcasts. I really can't watch a video and drive the tractor safely. I mean, seriously. How about when we're driving cars? I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen to podcasts while they're driving. I'm sure Brandi does. But Brandi, you do realize how dangerous it is to watch the video, okay? So please don't do that. So it's much more versatile. And plus, you can also put that audio podcast on the social media as well. Something we do also that's really cool is we can turn that audio into a YouTube video. And what it does is it plays the audio and it has just the image of the company, their logo on it. So so now it's on YouTube in an audio that's really a video, or a video that's really audio. And so it's quite versatile. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. So Brandi, you got another question?
Yeah, of course I have comments first. Sheryl, I never watch the video of podcasts. I can usually get through 2 podcasts a day. It starts on my drive to the gym, and then I usually finish that one while I'm getting ready in the morning, while I'm in the shower through the Bluetooth over speaker, and then while I'm getting ready. And then usually like in the evening if I'm walking the dog or on my way home from work. So, because like I said, I'm a podcast junkie. I love what you said about YouTube, because my teenagers they don't watch TV anymore. They literally, like, YouTube is their TV. I mean, it's crazy to me, but my son will watch hours and hours of YouTube a day. Circling back around to what we said about disqualifying the customer, qualifying the customer. One of the things that we do in my company and that I recommend to the companies I work with is I can have all 5 CSRs on the phone this time of year, and we're still going to get 10 calls coming in at the same time. So we're going to get people getting voicemail. So we have on our voicemail the price of the service and also the month that we're booking in, because right now, going back, it fits perfectly in with Tom's book about when can you do it. Right now, all we're hearing is, can you get to me before Christmas?
Yeah.
And so my question is, what about sponsorship? A lot of the podcasts I listen to have sponsorship. Is that something that you guys deal with? I don't even know a lot about sponsorship. I just know that I hear these commercials, and to be honest, I'm not going to lie to you, I usually fast forward through them.
Yeah. So from my perspective, a traditional podcast where people talk about how great they are and how they're trying to either monetize it or break even on it by having advertising is really not going down the right road. So picture this. If you get in front of a room and you're talking about solving problems for the 150 people who are watching you, you don't get up there and say, hey, we're great. And you don't say, by the way, my talk is sponsored by Acme, right? I mean, you just don't. I mean, maybe on a slide something comes up with something. But so my point is you want to be as credible as possible. You just want to lean back and you want to say through the podcast to the listener, I'm here for you. These are frequently asked questions that people have. Let me answer these at no cost to you. And you don't even have to say on the podcast, if you're interested, call me, because they will. They will. I mean, just like when, someone on stage at the end, they don't say, hey, by the way, if you need to speak with me after, I'm going to be forming a line over there. No, you just, when you stop, trust me, when you come down those little steps off the platform, people will be there. And if they don't, you might want to redo your talk for next time. But same with the podcast too. If you're not getting responses, you may want to change what you're doing. And so there is a science to it. And a lot of people say, well, I understand what you do, but I want to do it my way. And I'm saying, well, you can do it your way, but I can't be part of it because I have a system that I help you with. And it breaks my heart when I see people do it themselves and they really don't know what they're doing. But it is what it is.
Okay. So Jim, on your system, and
yeah.
Are you conducting an interview with your client? Are you on the podcast with them, or are they doing this alone?
No, I am on it with them. I interview them. I call myself Check a Pro Joe. So to back up a little bit, I had mentioned in 2005, I had started my business here in Houston. And when it first started, it was like a local Angie's List. So we pre-qualify contractors. So every home service provider I have on my program is pre-qualified. We check their insurance, licenses, and references. So not only is the client getting a professional to interview them, but they're also being put on a pedestal by saying this is a pre-qualified home service provider, and they've gone through this stringent process. So they're not out there alone. I'm controlling that interview, and not everyone can interview people. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm still getting better at it. And you have to know how to ask the questions, and you have to use the right tonality and cadence with the voice. And there's just a process. And you want to make sure that the people listening are listening to something that's pleasing to them, but also has authority. And there's just a great mix. And ever since social media came out, everybody has a soapbox, everybody has a microphone, and everybody's given the news. And it's really kind of chaotic and confusing to people. So I bring my old-fashioned broadcast experience from the 1980s into current day, and it really works out well because I've learned over the decades how to position something that's not changed. Whether you were listening to the radio in '84 and hearing me, or today hearing me on a podcast, it's still the same type of message distribution that people want to consume. A lot of people have trouble listening to podcasts. Professional podcasts are great. Some other ones are like, that guy talks too fast, or he's slurring, that type of thing. And I see Brandi because she's nodding her head because she's a huge podcast consumer.
And I talk too fast. So I'm feeling like I might not be cut out.
and all this stuff can be taught, but most people, after being alive for decades, can't really change what they've been doing. And it's interesting. I started doing this when I was 18, and I've been working on it for a long time. And there is a difference. That's why some people will hire a professional voiceover talent to read a radio commercial or something for their podcast, because they know that they want a more professional sound. And so we offer that as well.
And Jim, yesterday I've got two friends, Taylor Hill, Carter Harkins, with a company called Spark Marketer. So they were talking about websites yesterday and SEO. And this is kind of true for podcasts also, because they said what you wanted to project was what they called the EAT policy, EAT. And the EAT stands for expertise, authenticity, and trust. So that's what you're building with this by doing these podcasts. Am I correct?
I'm writing that down.
I thought it was
making me hungry. Yeah. No. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
that's right.
I thought it was dead. In fact, when I heard that, I wrote a note down to make sure to include that. So Carter, Taylor, if you listen, hey, I've copied your words and I'm giving you recognition for them from hearing them from you. So Sheryl, this will be your last question for Jim. What else would you ask Jim on today's broadcast?
Well, I'm going to pull a Brandi on you. I'm going to do a comment first. One of my dear friends and mentors of speech is Scott McCain, who began his radio career at a very young age, moved into speaking and also into coaching. And we've had conversations before about, again, and you brought length of these up. But so we've got so many that are, I got the idea you don't like long ones. And so I'm using Brandi's company. If Brandi's going to be using your service, how often should she put up a new one to keep it fresh enough that the people that are following her stay interested?
So that's a great question. And I will say that even though Brandi may want someone to follow her, a lot of people aren't going to follow. So I'll start with that first. People are on your website. You're a home service provider. They're probably not coming back to your website until they need you again. But when they're there, before they make a decision to call you or book an appointment with you versus your competition, they're now getting information they need. So, people in home service, let's say you're a plumber, you're probably not going to have people follow you on a regular basis. They're going to your website when they have a problem. So that's number one. I recommend minimum once a month, but most of my clients were doing weekly podcasts that are between 3 and 5 minutes long. I know all of you will agree with me on this, I'm sure, because you're all smart. See how I set that up? Now you have to agree because you're smart. When you go to a podcast site and you see the last time they posted was in 2019, they lose all credibility. So I have a suggestion. If you are not going to keep up with it, take it down. Right? Because 2019, you're like, it's 2022, it's almost 2023. Are these guys in business? Right? I mean, Brandi, once again, she's nodding. And it's true. So do it on a regular basis and, frequently and regular. And to do a 3 to 5 minute one once a week isn't hard. And I'll tell you what we do for our clients. I do it all the time. I get on a Zoom call with them and I record for an hour with them once every 5 to 6 weeks. And then our team goes back and cuts it all up. It's painless. And we know what to cut out, what to put in, and what to add. And so the client doesn't have to know anything about podcasting. They don't have to know anything about marketing or sales because we're the ones that come up with the whole package, the whole questioning. Because I know home service well. I've been working with home service providers for 20 years. All my clients are contractors. So I understand the ins and outs of the business. And that's kind of a unique niche. No one really does what I do. It's interesting. It's very unique.
Okay, that's good. So Brandi, what would be the last thing you would ask Jim?
All right, I'm going to take kind of comment. I'll just comment and then a question. It was going to be a 2-part question, but Sheryl led into it with me because I was going to ask about consistency because I know my favorite podcasts that they do weekly. I know the day they drop. So I really pay attention to that closely. The length surprises me, the 3 to 5 minutes. I hate anything like longer than 30 minutes. You lose my attention span after that, but 3 to 5 seems really short. So that actually surprised me. But getting back to the qualifying, disqualifying the customer, are you comfortable answering to disqualify or qualify our listeners what something like this costs to use your services?
So, Brandi, your question is, if someone who is watching this now or listening to it was interested in working with me, what would it cost?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
It costs about $1,000 a month.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay,
But so I have to say, hold on, I have to say, but someone might say, well, that's not expensive, or someone might say that's too expensive. You'd have to contact me to see everything you get. But yeah, to answer your question, it's about $200 and some odd a week.
Mm-hmm.
And we do charge weekly because we work on it weekly because we're creating these, we're posting them, and we're also doing SEO on the back end. And that's a whole nother thing we didn't get into, but it's more than just a podcast. Like I said, this is very, very different.
Okay. Well, like I said, I think when we came in here, Jim, I'd say that Brandi, Sheryl, myself, we have more of an image of, hey, you got to do a podcast to compete with them 2.1 million podcasts that are out there all over the place, and you can't hear them all. But what you've specified and spelled out today is how this is used to, in your local market, to qualify customers, to establish yourself as that local expert. So you're not promoting, hey, we're going to make you the top 10 of podcast producers in the country. In other words, this is a podcast, think of just like your website, as a way to get your message out, to get it out effectively, to speak to your customers, to build your authority in your community. And we define the community as the people that buy from you and the people that may buy from you. It's a way to take the suspects out there and move them into prospects and be able to move them much quicker into being an actual customer. And then from that point, build into what we call the enthused customer that is telling everybody how great you are. Have I pretty well got a sense of what we're talking about here today?
Jerry, you're hired. That is perfect. That is exactly it. And
Yep.
it's really that simple. And I know all three of you went into this almost an hour ago thinking it was going to be one thing, and now you see it's a different thing. And so the education is so important, like anything else. Our customers need to really know what we do. And, whether you're a plumber or a pool company, or you're in the, chimney cleaning business. So it's, that's correct, Jerry. You all three understand perfectly. So you're all very smart.
So,
Yep.
Brandi, did this open your eyes up to how this could work for Flues Brothers?
Yes and no. You know me, I don't like to do anything that everybody else is doing. But it definitely did. And I went into it like telling you guys before, like, I have no idea what I'm going to ask this guy. I've done research, but I don't have a lot of questions prepared. And now I feel like I have 50 more questions. So this was great.
Well, we got his email if you want to talk to him further. So,
I want his
Sheryl,
book. I'm going to email him for his book.
yeah, Sheryl, what about you? did this teach you anything that you could possibly use in your outdoor living manufacturing business on that side?
It did. I mean, it's a very competitive business, probably more competitive right now than the chimney service business. So it definitely gives me a new track to evolve. I'm probably one, and I don't want to use the word procrastinator because that's kind of what it is, but I'm probably the one that will hold back the longest to do something and push it forward, because to be honest, I've been in this many years and I've never had to advertise. And I know this is not what you call advertising, but it is. But I also know that the day's coming, is here, that I'm going to have to start something like this to keep it going.
Yeah, Jim, one of our listeners just put a question up, and I put it on the screen, and it involved, how do you track the return on the investment for a podcast? So that's the things that we preach to our people. You got to be able to track and measure what's your return for the investment. So is there a way that there can be a tracking of this investment, see what the true ROI is of it?
So ROI is very tricky when it comes to anything like this. So, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I'm going to give you some examples. When you get a brand new website, how do you track the ROI on that? Mm-hmm. Just a question.
I understand completely.
Yeah. How about when you get 5 new vehicles wrapped? Because are you really going to put a unique tracking phone number on each one? 5 new phone numbers? Oh yeah, that guy gets more than the other guy. So it's along those lines. You have to look at it as same thing with a business card or stationery or anything else. This is or a new uniform or an ID badge. These are all things we invest in to become more professional and stand out. So if you want to stand out, you're going to have a really nice website. You're going to have nice vehicles. You're going to have nice uniforms. I want to know what the ROI is on that. And I'm not trying to be, a smart aleck here. It's just, it's not like, let me back up. Ever since the internet has become so popular, and then we're able to track things from Google and Facebook and so forth, everybody wants ROI down to the nth degree. Some things just can't be. But you're going to know when people call you and say, I heard you talk on the podcast. So the same thing would be for radio or TV. How do you really measure that for sure? Because when they see your TV commercial or hear you on the radio and then go to Google and Google what you do and then see you there, they're going to tell you they found you on Google. So is your TV worthless? Nope. That's my answer.
Okay, brother. Well, listen, I've enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate the compliment you paid me when you saw me go on stage there at Tommy Mello's. That was very well received, and I appreciate that. So I appreciate you spending time. Folks, if you've been listening to us, we have put Jim's email address in the comments. His website is checkapro.com. And Jim, anybody that wants to have a conversation with you, you're open to a conversation and explaining how this works. Am I correct?
Absolutely. People can contact me and I'll talk to them anytime.
Right. And if they send you an email and want a copy of your book, you're going to send them the book free of charge. Am I right?
Free of charge. Yes. And I'm working on a new book too. And this is a prelude to it. This is a quick read. It's only 50 pages long and the book is only that big. And it'll really help you understand what you need to do if you're going to produce your own podcast. And if you want to learn more about what we do, our contact information is in that as well.
Dude, that's fantastic. So I want to thank you for joining us live today on the live broadcast. If you're watching the replay or you're watching our podcast, because this is also uploaded as a podcast and available on many of your most popular podcast channels. So we actually turned this show not only as a broadcast, but we turn it into a podcast and it goes out. And our podcast is also distributed we use a service that moves it out, just like what Jim's talking about, and getting it in all these different locations. So if you're wanting to separate yourself, if you want to become more of an authority, I think we've given you a way today to do it. But it's just like your website, you're going to have expertise in to make this happen. Brandi, do you agree with what I've come up from today on this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, this is just like when we get frustrated with the people that call and say they clean their own chimney. Like, why wouldn't you turn it over to a professional? To me, that's just invaluable.
That's correct. Sheryl, what about you? Do you got a grasp for this today?
I did. I was very informative. Like all the others here, I've learned a lot. You think you know everything in the world when you get a certain age, but you kind of figure out you're not quite as good as you thought you were. So I live in the other generation when I remember I only had a radio and no TV.
You know, you can walk down the same path every day and there is a pothole that will reach out and grab you and you've seen this pothole. You just never thought it was going to get you. Okay. And there's a little story behind that we're not going to share, but you did see Brandi and Sheryl both smile as I would that because they know exactly what I'm talking about today. So anyway, I really appreciate you being here, Jim. We look forward. Maybe we'll get back together one day and we'll do some more work together like this. But if you're listening, we very much appreciate your attendance on our live broadcast or when you listen to the replays on any of your social medias or on our podcast series. So, hey, look us up. We are CVC Success Group.com. And our goal, our mission, what we do is we help people just like you get those dreams and turn them into your business reality. So join us next week on the next episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.